I don't got all day here. Let's get a move on.
When Monolith released their first-person shooter game Fear back in 2005, we were introduced to a new and different brand of horror game. It's not resource-managing survival horror that Monolith does so well, but instead disturbing psychological horror, the kind of thing we rarely get to see. And Condemned Criminal Origins carries the same legacy that put Fear on the map, proving itself as one of the scariest games since Fatal Frame. Condemned Criminal Origins revolves around Ethan Thomas, a federal agent in the Special Crimes Unit. Ethan starts out investigating the case of a gruesome serial killer, but ends up in a jam after said serial killer succeeds in framing Ethan for the murder of 2 police officers.
How does it feel to be on this end of the gun?
From here, Ethan's focus shifts from catching the serial killer to simply clearing his name, and a few other plotlines introduce themselves as the game continues. One of these plotlines that is central in both the story and gameplay are flashbacks and visions that periodically occur throughout the game, adding an eerie level of intrigue to the story. These visions, however, eerie as they are, never get fully explained to the player. This is good and bad at the same time. On the one hand, you're left in the dark wondering what the hell's going on, which can be confusing, while on the other hand, you're left in the dark wondering what the hell's going on, which can be effectively terrifying. Yes, Condemned is a first-person game in which you sometimes have access to guns, but no, it's not a first-person shooter. The game is set in an anonymous US city filled to the brim with psychotic squatters and homicidal junkies that are best dealt with using whatever blunt object you can get your hands on. The cause of this psychosis is never explained, but if a bum wants to hit me in the head with a pipe, that's a good enough reason for me to hit him back, and junkies are, well, junkies. Monolith has created a fairly unique combat system that revolves around melee weapons. You can only carry one at a time, the speed, damage, and reach of which depends on what you choose to pick up. Blocking is a must, literally keeping your skull from getting cracked open, and stunning your enemy so you can crack open his skull instead. As stated earlier, you will find guns from time to time, but each one is limited to however many bullets it's got in the magazine, and you're unable to reload even if you find another gun of the exact same caliber. There are also finisher moves you can perform if you bring an enemy to his knees, adding a little more violence to the already gruesome gameplay, if that's possible. The combat system, for the most part, works extremely well. Every weapon has a good sense of weight, and brutal, bone-crunching sound effects come with each hit you score on an enemy. The level of atmospheric terror never lets up from start to finish. You never leave the first-person perspective no matter what you're doing, which adds to the intense level of immersion, and most people will probably have a difficult time playing this game in the dark.
He's right above us! Call for backup now!
The story is told through both in-engine cutscenes that usually occur at the beginning and end of each level, and forensic investigation sequences that you'll need to undertake between the skull cracking. Both work pretty well, though the forensic sequences would have been a little more interesting if they were actual player-oriented gameplay. Instead, you're told exactly where, when, and how to investigate each piece of evidence you find, which is good because it avoids confusion and gives you another clue to further Ethan's investigation. It just would have been nice to have a little more control over how that happens. The cutscenes serve their purpose to both freak you out and deliver another plot twist here and there, and the forensic sequences are an interesting way to keep you in the first-person view and tell the story at the same time.
Analyzing chemical composition.
Graphics and sound are two things that are crucial to the game's gripping sense of immersion. Condemned thrusts you into a dark underworld setting that is atmospheric to the extreme, with an oversaturated level of urban decay most likely inspired by movies like Seven and Silence of the Lambs. The environments themselves, while mostly dark and dreary, keep you constantly on edge with an eerie ambience in both the lighting and background noise. The character models don't look quite as good as the environments, with some repetitive models being used over and over again, but with the grotesque body language and disturbing look of each psychopath you kill, it's a little hard to notice. In the end, Condemned Criminal Origins doesn't exactly live up to the standard for survival horror gameplay set by Resident Evil or Silent Hill, but it still manages to surpass a sense of fear and terror of most any game to date. It's certainly not for the faint of heart. The linear level progression and somewhat frantic group battles aren't enough to spoil the game's impressive scare factor, and the well-designed skull-bashing combat system keeps the gameplay unique among other games in the genre. While some people might find even today's $19.99 price tag too pricey for the content the game offers, Condemned Criminal Origins is a must-play for any survival horror fan, because the trademark brutal violence will draw you right into the game's brutal world.
There's one coming your way.
People are scared. We need to get this one.